Hello everyone, I'm Matthew J. Croutch, and this is the pilot episode of a new podcast that I'm going to call Matthew Crouch's Writing Circle. And I'm joined with two of my friends here. Ladies, could you introduce yourselves?
I am Amanda Muratoff.
Hi, and I'm Kayla Hansen, and we are the authors of the Pantracer Chronicles.
You both are fantasy romance, so I want to get the fantasy stuff out of the way first because I focus on. Sorry, I'm bad to say I will get the romance stuff out of the way first so that we can dig into the fantasy part. So, with the male characters in your books, the heroes, were they based on men you knew? No, or were they like your ideal man?
I mean, I wish they were based on men we knew.
Right? I mean, there's definitely characteristic traits, I think, that come through sometimes based on men that we know. I know a character later in the series, I definitely based some of his quirks on my husband. But like for the most part, I admit Ken, who's like the main character in the first part of the series, I think I created him originally when I was like 13 or something like that. And it was definitely okay, what's my ideal man? Like, kind of dark and mysterious and stuff like that. But then Ken kind of grew into a totally different character. And Amanda and I working together, and Amanda's input into Ken started shaping him into a different place. And I mean, I think it always characters have parts of the author when you're creating them. Like it's always kind of natural that you take pieces of you and put them into your characters. Because I mean, I'm Amory, like is Amanda all day long, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm like a mash of like Amory and Ray. If you put them together, that's basically my personality. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I wouldn't really call the men in our books like ideal, right? Because they all have their flaws and they all have their issues. I think I think as Kayla was saying, like they're just like kind of like a piece of us, and they're a piece of us that like can complement another piece, if that makes sense.
But how important was it for the relationships in the novels to feel realistic? Because as I read through the series myself, I found a lot of times where I felt realism in the relationship.
I think that comes from the nature of how Amanda and I write, actually, because the way that we structured the series is essentially there's certain characters that are my authority and then certain characters that are hers. And so a lot of times when you're seeing those genuine relationships, those genuine conversations, it's because it's genuinely me and Amanda going against each other. And so I think that actually did create some really great compliments in our characters and really made their relationships work really great because I bring something completely different to the table than Amanda does. And so it creates those genuine relationships that you're talking about. And I think that that's part of one of the benefits of the way that Amanda and I work together, which is very unique. I actually haven't heard of other co-authors who work in the way that she and I do.
No, neither have I. We're weird.
So that brings up a question of how do you two decide we're going to co-author a series and manage not to strangle each other?
I mean, we've had our moments. There have definitely been times where we would like to strangle each other. It might
Or
be
should we
good
live
that
very far apart from each other?
we live very far apart. That might be why we're still alive. But honestly, generally, like especially when it comes to plot, things that we disagree on, you know, I really want something to happen, or Kayla really wants something to happen, and the other does not. We're like, no, that's bad, that's cliche, or whatever. We try really hard to view those times as opportunities, because if one of us isn't happy, then that says something, right? Like, we have to trust each other's instincts when it comes to writing, because we're in this together, right? So if we trust each other's instincts and we tackle these conflicts like opportunities, then it really just gives us a chance to come up with something that's even better, that we both love. And so generally that's like how we kind of go about it. And if we don't like something, then it doesn't happen. And we just work really, really hard to come up with something that we both are happy with.
How did this relationship start? Did you find do you meet up somewhere, or was it online, or?
So that's actually kind of a funny story, because it is 100% online. That is how Amanda and I met. We actually met on the old website called Neopets. If you've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
We met in the forums of Neopets. It was a place for text-based role-playing, which is where she and I kind of got our start. And we exchanged AIM names way back in the day and stayed in touch via AIM, and just were writing stories together. And this is since we were 12, 13 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've known each other a long time. And then coincidentally, both of our love for Disney is what also ended up bringing us together in real life, because the first time we met was at Disneyland. Amanda conveniently happened to have a trip planned, and I was going to college in the area. And so we met in person for the first time. I think we were 19, 20 in that range.
I was 19 and you were 20.
Yeah. So we met in person around that time in California at Disneyland, and then just kind of kept going online. It's always been an online conversation, always writing stories back and forth. And then it was in 2018 when both Amanda and I's life situations kind of aligned properly, that we realized we should have been writing books the entire time instead of just writing this thing just for ourselves. And so that's when the Pantracer Chronicles started, was when we finally were like, okay, let's go back to these old characters, this old world that we created, and let's try something different and write it as books. And so that's when we finally actually started working on the series as it is known now.
Interesting. So let's move into fantasy. So as I've read it, I can see parts of different fantasy stuff. So I want to ask you, what were your biggest fantasy inspirations?
You go first.
I read a lot of like Sword of Truth series. But honestly, a lot of the fantasy I read was like contemporary fantasy. I read books about a girl who was fearless, like literally or whatever. And I don't even remember them all. I loved the idea of magic. And then when I connected with Kayla, because of like her inspirations, which she'll get into, the stuff that we kind of went from there became like our own thing. And at the time when we were doing most of our writing in the beginning, I wasn't reading a whole lot of like related fantasy. It was really just what we were writing and what was in my head. So I always have a hard time with that question because I didn't have a lot of like specific inspiration.
So my gateway fantasy, that's what I call it, was Dragonlance. I hit a phase when I was like 12 years old that I decided I was obsessed with dragons. And my mom took me to the bookstore and I literally found the first book I could find that had a dragon on the cover. And it was Dragon's Bottom Twilight. And so from there, I became thoroughly, thoroughly obsessed with fantasy. Um, and then Harry Potter was definitely a big influence for me as well growing up, because I read that, at a very influential time in my life and really loved the story even of how J.K. Rowling even became an author. Like I found that just kind of inspirational in itself too. But I'm kind of with Amanda too, that a lot of my obsession with fantasy comes from writing fantasy. And it's because I've always written fantasy. And it's kind of funny whenever people try to suggest a new show or a new book to me. I'm like, okay, does it have a supernatural, paranormal, or fantasy element to it? No, then I'm not interested. So I'm definitely like, it's that thing, like what Amanda said, it's being just fascinated by magic, and it's that ultimate escape from reality, right? Because fantasy is not reality, right? And so it's this world that we can create that I just, wish was real.
Here's a question I wonder if you got in your books. I've read all of them, and sorry, and I like all of them. Uh, but there's some dark moments. Where do you draw your dark moments from, and why do you think they're important?
I I mean the dark moments are important because that's when the characters grow the most. That's when they're faced with their trial and whatever thing it is they have to overcome. And I mean, really, victory is meaningless if it didn't come with a struggle, if it didn't come by overcoming something really powerful. And so, without saying too much about the dark moments as spoilers, like I know we do touch on some pretty heavy, like mental health topics, women's health topics, and others. Um, it's a lot of it comes from personal experience, and some of it, I mean, some of it doesn't. I've never been tortured, but there's a lot to be said for how people overcome like their darkness, and I think that's very important in their character arc.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I admit between the two of us, I'm probably the darker one of us, that tries to bring in these dark moments. And it's that humanizing factor. And it is, fantasy is fantastic, but you still have to pull it down into reality for the stories to be relatable. And I think darkness and those dark moments are some of that little bit of reality. It's that suffering, it's that need to overcome. But I think Amanda really nailed it, because it's those you have to create those moments for characters to grow, otherwise there is no story. And so you need to give them things to conquer. And that's, I think, the importance of those dark moments.
I completely agree. Um, now that focus on your world, when you were making the world that your characters were interacting with, what was important for you, the creation of of that world?
I think the thing that was important in a lot of the creation for us was creating a world that we believed in, and that we liked, because that's something, but also creating diversity, because that's the thing that makes a world, especially in creating the countries and things like that. So like in particular, our series embraces LGBTQ plus, and all that. And that's something that Amanda and I believe should exist in the world. So we wanted to incorporate that into our world. And so that's something that is in Pantracia. And then we also wanted, and I think my internet might be going out a little bit, Amanda, so you should probably take over the rest of this.
So yeah, when we were creating the world, I mean, it went through many phases and changes as we were evolving it, so to speak. But it was really important to us to portray people and humanity in a way, not necessarily that's ideal, but in a way that is more accepting. So, there's still darkness, there's still bad people, there's still, awful choices that are being made. But at the same time, issues like race and gender and sexuality, those aren't issues in Pantracia. Those are just facts of life. And we strongly believe like that's just the way it should be. Like, love is love and people are people, and who cares like what other people do. um that's not to say they're all good people in Pantracia, but I don't know, we kind of just wanted to take a different angle of view on what society could look like even with its flaws. And then of course, you kind of go a little deeper into the world creation, and we took a step further in fantasy where we didn't use races like dwarves and elves and trolls and stuff, right? Like we have humans and dragons, but outside of that, everything is unique to Pantracia, and we have our own unique monsters. We have unique flora, unique diseases and festivals and tons of stuff. Like everything that's in Pantracia is thought out. And honestly, if we put everything that we knew about Pantracia in the books, they would be so much longer. But we don't want to just info dump the whole time. But I mean, that's kind of why we play with the idea of making like a Pantracia compendium, just to really show people everything that there is about Pantracia. But the world is quite deep.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, we've been building this world for over 20 years,
Yeah.
because we started creating it when we first started writing together, when we were 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
And so it's been an evolution over time, and it's been kind of a little sandbox playground for us too, because what would it be like if we had a government that was completely run by women? There's Ziona. That's why we created Ziona the way that it is. And what would it be like if we had a tyrant king, Helga, who needs to be overthrown? It gave us kind of a sandbox playground.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies, for your time. Where can where can viewers find your books and where can they follow you?
Well, we have a website, pantracia.com, pantracia.com. You can find tons of info about our books, about our world. We have a pronunciation guide on our website, so it's kind of a big resource for people interested in the series. We are on Facebook. We have a Facebook group called the Rebels Hearth. You're welcome to search it up and join us. We have Pantracia Chronicles on Facebook, and Kayla and I each have our own Instagram handles, A Muratoff _author and K Hansen _author are our Instagram handles. And don't worry, if you follow both of us, you won't get a whole lot of repeated stuff. We're careful. I don't know, is there anywhere else you can find us, Kayla?
I just made a Blue Sky account. I don't know if you've heard about that one yet. It's a new social media that's coming out. I just made K Hansen -author on Blue Sky. Now I think you nailed it. I think that's all of it. The best place is definitely to go to our website, pantracia.com. That's definitely the best place to kind of follow up on us everywhere and see the books, take a peek at them.
Yeah, and sign up for a newsletter because you get a free prequel novella for doing so.
Thank you, ladies, and thank you for the interview for the pilot episode. Everyone, I am Matthew J. Croutch, and I will see you Friday. Have a great day. See you.